Hello there, my companion in the quiet hours of night. Once again, another evening has arrived, and the world outside has begun to surrender to silence. The harsh sounds of daylight, the relentless spinning wheels of work and worry, all those seemingly endless anxieties, they have all receded now, making way for this peaceful sanctuary we share. It is just you, me, and the gentle embrace of nightfall. Find yourself a position of perfect comfort. Feel the weight of your body as it gradually sinks deeper into the soft embrace of your bed. Let your blanket wrap around you like a tender hug, washing away any lingering tension from the day. Take a deep breath in and slowly, slowly let it flow out. Feel your chest rise and fall, rise and fall. Every burden you have carried is drifting away with each gentle exhale. Tonight, we will not be seeking tales of heart-pounding adventure, legendary battles, or intricate palace conspiracies. No. Tonight, we are journeying to a hidden corner of history, a corner that might seem, well, rather dull. A story about examinations. Does not sound particularly thrilling, does it? Perhaps it reminds you of those drowsy afternoon hours in dusty classrooms, or those exhausting late-night study sessions that stretched until dawn. But trust me when I say that sometimes the most seemingly mundane things hold the most extraordinary secrets. It is like a perfectly still river. The surface appears motionless, undisturbed, but deep beneath lies an entire world of wonder, waiting to be discovered in the gentlest possible way. We are going to travel together to ancient China, not to meet mighty emperors or renowned generals, but to follow a much quieter figure, a scholar, a young man, perhaps no longer quite so young, who had wagered his entire life, his family's entire future, on the tip of a brush pen. We will explore together the unbelievably strict rules of the imperial examination system, rules created not just to find talented individuals, but to test human patience, endurance, and even luck to their absolute limits. This is not a lecture. You do not need to memorize anything. You do not need to strain to concentrate. Let my words flow through your mind like slow, moving clouds drifting across a midnight sky. Allow your imagination to paint pictures, to hear sounds, to smell the fragrances of a time long past. And if, during this journey, gentle sleep finds you and draws you away, well, that would be the most wonderful thing of all. That is our ultimate destination tonight. So close your eyes now. Relax your forehead. Let your shoulders drop. Feel warmth spreading throughout your entire body. Our journey is about to begin. And if you find this story soothing enough to accompany other evenings, consider subscribing to join us again. But for now, let me tell you about the shadow of a student. Picture, if you will, not the frantic clicking of keyboards or the blue glow of computer screens, but something far more deliberate, more meditative. Imagine yourself in a time when knowledge was not instantly available at your fingertips, when learning required a different kind of devotion entirely. The rain outside grows softer still, becoming almost a whisper against the window. In this gentle rhythm, we begin to step back through centuries, back to a world where the pursuit of learning was not just an occupation, but a sacred calling that could consume an entire lifetime. In that distant world, young men would wake before dawn, not to check their phones or grab coffee on the run, but to begin a ritual as old as civilization itself. They would light oil lamps that cast dancing shadows on paper-thin walls. They would prepare their minds for hours of study that would stretch long into the night. Can you hear it? The soft shuffle of felt slippers on wooden floors, the gentle scrape of a brush being prepared, the almost inaudible whisper of silk clothing moving in the pre-dawn stillness. These were the sounds of dedication, of dreams being carefully tended like delicate gardens. Our scholar, let us follow him now, moves through his morning routine with practiced precision. Every gesture has been refined through countless repetitions. This is not hurried productivity, but something closer to meditation, each action flowing seamlessly into the next. The world he inhabits moves at the pace of seasons rather than seconds. Success is measured not in quarterly reports or immediate gratification, but in decades of patient cultivation. Failure means not a missed deadline, but potentially a lifetime of unfulfilled dreams. As we settle deeper into the story, feel your own breathing synchronize with the timeless rhythm of that ancient world. Your modern worries begin to feel as distant as that rain outside your window. Present, but somehow separate from the warm cocoon of this moment. Let the weight of centuries settle gently around you like an old, familiar blanket. We are about to discover how the simple act of learning to write a single character could take months to master, how memorizing texts could consume years, and how a 3-day examination could determine the fate of entire families. But do not let these details burden your mind. Instead, let them flow past you like that gentle rain. Each fact a soft droplet contributing to the overall atmosphere of a time when life moved slowly, deliberately, and with profound intention. The scholars of ancient China knew something we might have forgotten in our rush toward instant everything, that the most profound achievements often come from the most patient processes. Tonight, we honor that patience. We embrace that slowness. We allow ourselves to be carried along by the unhurried current of a story that unfolds like a scroll being carefully, slowly unrolled. Are you comfortable? Is your breathing steady and deep? Good. Because now we are going to begin our first chapter, where we will discover how the simple act of grinding ink could become a form of meditation, and how the weight of a brush in one's hand could feel like holding the entire weight of one's future. The shadow of our scholar is beginning to take shape in the lamplight. Soon, we will follow him through his daily rituals, understanding not just what he did, but how it felt, the texture of paper beneath his palm, the scent of fresh ink, the ache in his back from hours of careful practice. Let these images form gently in your mind, like watercolors bleeding softly into wet paper. There's no need to grasp or hold on to any particular detail. Simply let the story carry you forward, deeper into relaxation, closer to that peaceful shore where sleep patiently waits. Before there were stressful examinations, before there were cramped testing chambers, there was something even more fundamental. There was the art of learning to write. Imagine, if you will, that you are not sitting before a glowing screen, not tapping rapidly on a keyboard. Instead, you are seated on a woven mat in a simple room where paper windows filter gentle, natural light. Before you lie the 4 treasures of the study, the 4 sacred tools of the scholar. First, the brush. Not a lightweight ballpoint pen that you barely notice in your hand. This is a brush made of bamboo, horn, or even precious jade for the handle, topped with carefully selected hairs, rabbit fur, goat hair, or the prized golden sable. Holding it, You feel its organic weight, a direct connection to the natural world. It is not a lifeless tool. It seems to possess a soul of its own. Each brush has its own personality, its own degree of firmness or softness. Learning to control it is an art form in itself. Second, the ink. There is no convenient bottle here. Instead, you have a solid ink stick, crafted from pine soot or tung oil soot, mixed with animal glue and fragrant herbs that release a subtle, earthy perfume. To have ink for writing, you must grind it yourself. You place the ink stick on an inkstone, a flat piece of slate, smooth and cool to the touch. You add a few drops of clear water to the stone's shallow well, and then you begin to grind. The motion must be perfectly circular, perfectly even, perfectly slow. Your wrist moves in a peaceful rhythm. There can be no rushing. If you grind too quickly, the ink will foam and become uneven. Too slowly, and you will not have enough ink to write. This is your first lesson in patience. In the quiet stillness of early morning, there is only the soft whisper of ink stick against stone. You can smell the clean fragrance of the ink as it spreads through the air, an aroma of earth, of growing things, of knowledge itself. This process is, in its own way, a form of meditation, helping your mind become calm and focused before you place that first crucial stroke. Third, the paper. Chuan paper, soft, ivory-colored, with an almost magical ability to absorb ink. When you spread a sheet before you, it makes the gentlest rustling sound. You can see the faint plant fibers woven throughout its surface. It is delicate. Even a single tear, drop or bead of perspiration could cause it to blur and smudge. And finally, the inkstone itself, holding that pool of deep black liquid you have just created with your own hands. Now, you dip your brush. The soft bristles slowly absorb the cool, dark fluid. You lift the brush, adjust your posture to sit straight-backed, your hand not resting on the table. Your breathing must be steady. Your mind must be still. And then, you lower the brush to paper. The first stroke, a simple, horizontal line. But this is not a lifeless mark. It must have a beginning, a body, and an ending. The brush touches down, glides gently across the surface, and finally lifts away. This single stroke is not merely a symbol. It is an expression of your character, your inner state of mind. It is a dance of the wrist, a flow of energy from your body through your arm, down to your fingertips, and out through the tip of the brush. And you must repeat this thousands of times, tens of thousands of times, day after day, year after year, just to write one character correctly. The price of perfection is repetition that borders on tedium. But within that tedium lies a kind of beauty, a refinement, a gradual transformation from clumsy to graceful. This is your first lesson on the path to becoming a scholar, a lesson in patience. Writing characters is only the beginning. The real challenge, perhaps the greatest challenge of all, is memorization. You have no Google. You have no Wikipedia. You have no library in your pocket. All knowledge must reside within your mind. And the volume of that knowledge is truly staggering. At the heart of your studies are the 4 books and 5 classics, the foundational texts of Confucian philosophy, the bedrock of the empire's entire system of ethics, morality, and governance. The 4 books include The Great Learning, The Doctrine of the Mean, The Analects, and Mencius. The 5 classics comprise the Book of Poetry, the Book of Documents, the Book of Rites, the Book of Changes, and the Spring and Autumn Annals. Combined, They contain over 400,000 characters. And the requirement is not simply to understand them. The requirement is to know them by heart. Every character, every punctuation mark, every pause. You must be able to quote any passage with perfect accuracy when asked. You must be able to reproduce them from memory without a single error. Try to imagine that process. Each day, the scholar rises before dawn. In the flickering light of an oil lamp, he begins to read. He does not read silently. He reads aloud, his voice echoing through the house, sometimes harmonizing with the voices of his father, his grandfather, others who have walked this same path. He reads the same passage over and over again, dozens, hundreds of times, until the characters are no longer symbols, but have become a melody, a rhythm carved deep into his subconscious. He paces back and forth in his room, hands clasped behind his back, mouth still murmuring. Is it not a pleasure, having learned something, to try it out at due intervals? After the 1,000th repetition, perhaps that pleasure has faded somewhat. He writes the passages from memory, fills pages with characters, then burns them, then writes again. His fingers develop calluses from gripping the brush. His back aches from hours of sitting. His eyes blur from staring at dense columns of text. His life becomes narrow, focused. There is little time for entertainment, no leisure activities with friends. His world consists of pages and pages of text, the words of sages from hundreds, thousands of years past. He lives more intimately with Confucius and Mencius than with his own neighbors. This is mental training taken to an extreme. But it is not just about memory. It is a way of Confucianizing the scholar's mind. Through endless repetition of teachings about loyalty, filial piety, benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trustworthiness, this entire system of thought becomes carved into his very being, becoming as natural as instinct. He is not just memorizing, he is being shaped, molded, transformed. And sometimes, during those late nights, when exhaustion finally overwhelms him, our scholar might collapse onto his books, falling asleep right there on the page. And in his dreams, the characters continue to dance. The voices of ancient sages continue to echo. Study has become not just his life, but his very dreams. A sweet obsession that is also deeply bitter. This path of learning is not a solitary journey. Behind every scholar hunched over his books lies the quiet shadow of an entire family. In ancient society, passing the imperial examinations was the only path for someone from the common classes to change their destiny, to enter the ranks of officialdom, to bring honor to their family name. It was a gamble, a decades-long gamble, where the entire family placed their bet on one person. Imagine you are the father, a farmer who has spent his life with his face to the earth and his back to the sky. You work twice as hard, 3 times as hard as anyone else. You eat sparingly, wear patched and mended clothes, all to save every small coin, to buy your son a fine brush, fragrant ink, pristine white paper. You do not make your son work in the fields. You tell him, your job is to study. Everything else I will handle. Your eyes, when you look at him, hold pride, hope, and a deep, gnawing anxiety. Imagine you are the mother. You wake early, sleep late, preparing every meal, mending every garment. You sit by the oil lamp, carefully stitching worn clothes back together. When your son studies late into the night, you quietly bring him a bowl of hot lotus seed soup, saying nothing, just placing it down and softly withdrawing, afraid to disturb his concentration. You listen to his recitation, drifting through the house, and silently pray to the ancestors, begging them to help your child succeed. Or perhaps you're the scholar's wife. You married a man whose time and attention are devoted almost entirely to his books. You shoulder all the household responsibilities, from caring for children to serving elderly in laws. You watch your husbands bent back through the door frame, feeling both pity and understanding. You are his solid foundation, his safe harbor, allowing him to dedicate himself completely to his studies. This sacrifice creates an invisible but enormous burden on the scholar's shoulders. He is not studying just for himself. He studies for his father, his mother, his wife, his children, for the honor of his entire lineage. Every time he feels discouraged, ready to give up, the faces of his loved ones appear, urging him to continue. The pressure is terrifying, and this is why the examinations are not merely tests of knowledge. They are tests of gratitude, of responsibility, of the ability to withstand crushing pressure. It is a gamble where the rewards are glorious, but the price of failure is devastatingly heavy. Let us follow our scholar through a typical day, feeling the weight of routine that shapes both body and mind. The rooster has not yet crowed when he wakes. In the deep blue darkness before dawn, he lights his oil lamp with steady hands, hands that have performed the same motion thousands of times. The flame springs to life, casting a small circle of warm, golden light in the cold room. He does not immediately begin reading. First, there is the ritual of preparation. The ink must be ground fresh each morning. He adds clean water to his inkstone, just the right amount, learned through years of practice. Too little, and the ink will be too thick. Too much, and it will be thin and weak. Round and round goes the ink stick, slowly releasing its dark essence into the water. This circular motion becomes a kind of moving meditation, a way of centering his mind before the day's intellectual labor begins. The fragrance of the ink mingles with the cool morning air. Outside, the world is still asleep, but inside this small circle of lamplight, the day's work has begun. When the ink is ready, and he knows by instinct when it has reached the perfect consistency, he arranges his paper. Each sheet must be positioned just so. The 4 books lie open beside him, their pages soft with age and handling. These are not just textbooks. They are his companions, his guides, his entire universe. He begins with review, reciting yesterday's passages from memory. His voice is low, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. The words flow like water, sometimes pausing at a difficult passage, sometimes speeding through familiar territory. His body sways slightly as he recites, a physical expression of the mental rhythm. When he is confident in yesterday's work, he moves to new material. This is the hardest part, taking unfamiliar characters and making them part of himself. He reads each passage aloud first, then copies it in his careful hand, then recites it from memory, then copies it again. Over and over, building layers of familiarity until the text becomes as natural as his own thoughts. The sun rises without his notice. Hours pass unmarked. His world has contracted to this small space, these ancient words, this endless repetition. Time moves differently here, not in the quick, fragmented moments of modern life, but in the slow, deep rhythms of true learning. By the time the household begins to stir, he has already been studying for hours. Breakfast is brought to him, Simple rice porridge, perhaps a pickled vegetable, and he eats without tasting, his mind still wrestling with a particularly complex passage from Mencius. The morning light grows stronger, but inside his study, the oil lamp still burns. Natural light is harsh on the eyes after hours of close reading. The steady, warm glow of the flame is easier, more comfortable. His back aches from sitting, but he barely notices. His fingers are stained with ink, calloused from gripping the brush, but this is simply the price of his calling. Midday brings a brief break. Perhaps he steps outside, blinking in the bright sunlight, like someone emerging from a cave. The world seems almost shockingly vivid after hours with books. The green of growing plants, the blue of the sky, the brown of earth. But even during this break, his mind continues to work, reviewing, questioning, memorizing. He might take a walk around the small courtyard, his lips still moving silently as he recites. His family has learned not to disturb him during these moments. They understand that even when his body rests, his mind must continue its work. Afternoon brings more of the same. More reading, more copying, more memorization. The pile of practice papers grows, sheets covered with characters, most of which will be burned at the end of the day. Only perfection is worth keeping. Everything else is just practice, just another step toward mastery. Evening falls, but the work continues. The oil lamp is trimmed and refilled. Perhaps his wife brings tea, hot, fragrant, carefully prepared. She sets it down without a word, understanding that even gratitude must be expressed silently here. The tea warms his throat, loosens the tension in his shoulders for a moment. Then the work resumes. Late into the night, he continues. When exhaustion finally becomes overwhelming, he carefully cleans his brushes, covers his inkstone, arranges his papers. Even these small tasks are performed with ceremony, with respect for the tools that serve his greater purpose. Only then does he allow himself to sleep. But even in sleep, the characters dance behind his closed eyelids. The voices of ancient sages whisper in his dreams. Study has become not just his occupation, but his entire existence. This is the price of the path he has chosen. This is the weight carried by anyone who would dare to challenge the imperial examinations. Day after day, year after year, building toward that moment when everything, all this sacrifice, all this dedication, all this patient accumulation of knowledge will be tested in 3 days that could determine the rest of his life. But for now, in these quiet hours of preparation, there is only the soft scratch of brush on paper, the whisper of turning pages, and the steady, patient rhythm of a mind expanding itself to hold the wisdom of centuries. Tomorrow will bring more of the same, and the day after that, and after that, until the accumulated weight of all this knowledge, all this practice, all this sacrifice transforms our young scholar into something more than he was, ready to face whatever trials await him in that distant examination hall. But that trial is still ahead of us. For now, let these images of patient study, of quiet dedication, of slow but profound transformation, settle gently into your mind like sediment in still water. Feel the peace that comes from understanding that some achievements require not speed, but patience, not brilliance, but persistence, not talent alone, but the willingness to show up day after day and do the work. After decades of lamplit study, that day finally arrives. The day of the provincial examination, the first crucial test in the imperial examination system. Picture yourself as our scholar now. You have bid farewell to your family, carrying with you a small tent, a basket of food, your precious writing materials, and a heart beating so fast you can feel it in your throat. The journey to the examination compound in the provincial capital may take many days, walking along dusty paths, sleeping in roadside inns where strangers from across the province share the same nervous energy. When you arrive, the atmosphere is completely transformed. A sea of humanity stretches before you. Thousands of scholars from every corner of the province have converged here, each face showing the same mixture of anxiety and hope that surely mirrors your own. Street vendors push through the crowds, calling out their wares, brushes, ink, food, lucky charms promising success. The air buzzes with tension so thick you could almost reach out and touch it. The examination compound looms before you like a fortress. Massive walls, thick and high, surround the complex. Looking at it, you might think it resembles a prison more than a school. And indeed, for the next few days, that is exactly what it will be. The great gates slowly swing open. The candidates begin to form lines, long serpentine queues that stretch and curve like sleeping dragons. You stand there with hundreds of others, under blazing sun or in cold drizzle, waiting for hours. Everyone clutches their belongings as if holding on to life itself. In this crowd, you can observe the full spectrum of human ambition. Fresh-faced young men of 18 or 20, their eyes bright with determination and innocence. But there are also middle-aged men, their beards touched with gray, eyes weary but still refusing to surrender. And there, an elderly man with snow-white hair, his back bent with age, requiring assistance just to stand, still persisting in this line. These are called white-headed scholars, students whose hair has turned white in pursuit of their dreams. Their presence is both inspiring and heartbreaking, a living reminder of just how unforgiving this path can be. Finally, your turn arrives. You step forward to the gates, where officials and guards stand waiting. Your heart pounds even faster. This is the first obstacle, the screening process. The primary goal of this inspection is to prevent cheating. And to prevent cheating, the authorities have devised measures so strict they border on the inhumane. First, they examine your belongings. Everything is searched thoroughly. Your food basket is emptied completely. Bread rolls are broken in half. Eggs are cracked open. They want to ensure you have not hidden any examination aids inside. Next comes your writing materials. Your ink stick is broken apart to check for hidden documents. Your inkstone is turned over, tapped, examined for secret compartments. Even your brush handles do not escape scrutiny. Every single item you have brought is inspected with suspicious eyes. But this still is not the worst part. The worst part is the body search. You are required to remove all of your clothing. You stand there, completely naked before the inspectors, stripped of all dignity. They will examine every inch of your body. Your hair is loosened and shaken out to ensure nothing is hidden in your topknot. Your ears, nose, and mouth are all checked. You are told to jump up and down. And, this is difficult to express delicately, they will inspect even the most private areas of your body, because throughout history, there have been ingenious candidates who have hidden tiny scrolls covered in minute writing in places no one would think to look. This is humiliation, a complete stripping away, not just of clothes, but of dignity, of the respect due to a scholar, to a human being. All those teachings about benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trustworthiness seem meaningless in this moment. After the inspection ends, you are given new clothes, simple garments with no pockets, and permitted to enter. You breathe a sigh of relief, but the feelings of shame and embarrassment linger. The gate closes firmly behind you. Now you are truly imprisoned. Inside the examination compound stand rows and rows of tile-roofed buildings, stretching in perfectly straight lines as far as you can see. Each building is divided into countless small cells, called examination stalls or scholar cells. This will be your home for the next 3 days. And home is perhaps too generous a word. It is really more like a box. A small, narrow cell, just large enough for one person to sit. It has no door, only a cloth curtain for minimal privacy. About 3 feet wide, maybe 4.5 feet deep, and just tall enough for you to stand upright, barely. Inside, there is nothing but 2 wooden planks. During the day, you will place 1 plank across 2 higher brick supports to create a writing desk. The other plank goes on lower supports to serve as your chair. The space is so cramped that your knees nearly touch the wall in front of you. At night, when you need to sleep, you will rearrange these same planks. You place them side by side on the lower supports, and they become your bed, a hard, wooden, narrow bed, where you will have to curl up to fit. And this same cell also serves as your toilet. You are provided with a bamboo tube or small bucket for waste. Everything happens right here, in this space of just a few square meters, where you eat, sleep, and take your examinations. When all candidates have taken their positions, a drum sounds. Guards lock all the gates of every section. From this moment, no one is permitted to leave, and no one is permitted to enter. You are completely cut off from the outside world. Silence descends. A heavy, oppressive silence broken only by the soft scratch of brushes on paper, the occasional dry cough from some distant cell, or the gentle rustle of a page being turned. On the first day, you work on classical texts. The examination questions are distributed. You must use your memory and understanding to write long essays analyzing the teachings of the ancient sages. Every rule about format is extremely strict. How much margin to leave, where to place the first character, how high to write the emperor's name compared to other characters. One small mistake could cause your entire examination to be failed immediately. You work diligently. The ink in your stone gradually depletes. You must prepare more. Your back aches painfully. Your eyes strain and blur. Your meal consists of dried foods brought from home, now cold and hard as stones. You eat hurriedly, tasting nothing, then return to writing. Night falls. Your only light is a small candle, flickering and wavering, casting a small pool of yellow light on your paper. Your shadow dances on the wall behind you, large and lonely. Cold wind seeps through cracks, making the candle flame dance uncertainly. When exhaustion overwhelms you, you arrange the 2 planks as a bed and try to rest. But how can you sleep well on a surface hard as stone, in a space cramped and cold, filled with the odors of ink, spoiling food, and human waste? Not to mention the pressure of tomorrow's examination and anxiety about what lies ahead. The second day focuses on administrative documents, imperial edicts, memorials, proclamations. The third day covers policy essays, analyses of political and social issues. 3 days, 3 nights pass, like one long nightmare. In such extreme isolation and pressure, the human mind can play strange tricks. And the examination compound, with its centuries of history, has accumulated stories all its own. People say that not every scholar survives those 3 terrible days. Some collapse and die from exhaustion. Some go mad from the pressure. Some take their own lives in despair. And their spirits, people whisper, still linger in those silent rows of cells. On deep nights, when wind blows through the empty corridors, some candidates swear they have heard mournful crying, the mumbled recitation of texts by someone who is not there, or even glimpsed white shadows drifting past. These stories, whether real or imagined, add another layer of dread to an already oppressive atmosphere. Candidates often carry protective amulets or whisper prayers to avoid being disturbed by these uninvited guests. Perhaps these are not real ghosts at all. Perhaps they are simply hallucinations created by extreme fatigue, weakness, and stress. But in that isolated box, the boundary between real and imaginary becomes gossamer thin. And the spirits of the examination hall, whether real or imagined, become an inseparable part of this terrifying experience. They embody the fear of failure, the souls of those who have fallen on this thorny path. Let us follow our scholar through his first night in this box, feeling what he feels, experiencing this ordeal through his senses. The candle flame wavers in a draft he cannot identify. Outside his tiny cell, the vast compound has settled into an uneasy quiet. Thousands of men are trying to sleep in identical boxes, each alone with his thoughts, his fears, his desperate hopes. The wooden planks that serve as his bed are unforgiving. No matter how he positions himself, some part of his body presses uncomfortably against the hard surface. The cloth curtain that serves as his door moves slightly in the night breeze, letting in occasional wafts of cold air. He can hear sounds, distant and muffled, but unmistakably human. Someone coughing, the scratch of a brush on paper from a neighboring cell where sleep proves elusive, the soft rustle of clothing as someone shifts position on wooden planks identical to his own. The smell in his cell is a mixture of fresh ink, cold food, and human occupancy. It is not pleasant, but it is not unbearable either. Just another reminder of how far he is from the comfort of home, from the familiar sense of his mother's cooking and the clean smell of sun-dried laundry. His mind will not be still. Despite his exhaustion, thoughts race through his head. Did he answer the first question completely? Was his calligraphy neat enough? Did he remember the exact wording of that passage from Mencius? Each uncertainty gnaws at him, making sleep even more elusive. When he does manage to doze, his dreams are filled with characters, thousands of them, dancing and rearranging themselves. He dreams of his father's weathered hands, his mother's concerned face, his wife waiting at home with their children. The weight of their hopes and sacrifices presses down on him even in sleep. He wakes several times during the night, once because his leg has gone numb from the hard surface, once because of a sound he cannot identify, once simply because anxiety jolts him awake like a physical shock. Each time, it takes long minutes to remember where he is, why he is here, what tomorrow will demand of him. The pre-dawn hours are the worst. Too early to rise and begin the day's work. Too late to hope for real rest. He lies on his wooden bed, listening to the compound slowly awakening around him. the distant sound of guards walking their rounds, the soft movements of other candidates beginning to stir. When the first drum finally sounds, announcing the beginning of the second day, it comes almost as a relief. At least now he can move, can focus his mind on something other than discomfort and worry. The second day brings new challenges. Administrative writing requires a different kind of precision, formal language, proper protocols, exact adherence to bureaucratic conventions. These are the skills he will need if he passes, if he becomes an official, if he joins the ranks of those who govern the empire. But such practical considerations feel abstract in this tiny box. Right now, his world has shrunk to immediate physical realities. The ache in his back, the strain in his eyes, the growing hunger as his supply of food dwindles. He rations his remaining provisions carefully. A piece of dried fruit in the morning, some preserved vegetables at midday, a small portion of rice cake in the evening. Everything tastes flat, colorless. His body needs fuel, but his mind is too focused on the examination to pay attention to flavor or enjoyment. The ink in his stone needs constant replenishment. The repetitive motion of grinding ink becomes almost meditative, one of the few calm moments in these days of intense pressure. Round and round the ink stick goes, creating the dark liquid that carries his thoughts onto paper, that might carry his dreams into reality. Other candidates are struggling too. Through the thin walls, he can hear evidence of their distress. Someone is coughing repeatedly, a dry, hacking cough that speaks of exhaustion and possibly illness. From another direction comes the sound of someone muttering to himself, perhaps reviewing memorized passages, perhaps simply talking to maintain sanity in this isolating environment. The afternoon brings a brief commotion somewhere in the compound. Voices, footsteps, some kind of disturbance. He tries not to think about what it might mean. Perhaps someone has collapsed. Perhaps someone has been caught cheating. Perhaps someone has simply given up and demanded to be released. Any of these possibilities reminds him of how precarious his own situation is, how fine the line between success and complete failure. As evening approaches, fatigue sets in more deeply. His handwriting, so carefully cultivated over years of practice, begins to show signs of strain. The characters are not quite as perfectly formed, the lines not quite as steady. But he pushes on, knowing that this examination might be his only chance, that 3 years will pass before the next opportunity. The third day dawns gray and overcast. Through the small opening at the top of his cell, he can see heavy clouds gathering. The weather matches his mood, somber, uncertain, weighted with possibility and dread in equal measure. Policy essays are perhaps the most challenging part of the examination. Here, he must demonstrate not just memorization, but genuine understanding, not just knowledge, but wisdom. He must analyze complex problems, propose solutions, show that he has the judgment necessary to help govern an empire. His brush moves across the paper more slowly now. Each character requires careful consideration. This is no longer about reciting memorized passages, but about thinking, about applying everything he has learned to new problems and situations. The hours pass in a blur of concentration and effort. His candle burns lower and lower. His supply of paper, so carefully hoarded, dwindles toward the end. Every sheet is precious. There are no second chances, no rough drafts, no corrections allowed. By the final evening, He has reached a state beyond exhaustion. His body has found reserves of energy he did not know he possessed. His mind, pushed to its limits, operates with a strange clarity born of desperation and determination. The last essay question stares up at him from the paper. His final chance to prove himself, to justify all those years of study, all his family sacrifices, all the hopes and dreams that have led to this moment in this cramped, uncomfortable box. He dips his brush one final time, takes a deep breath, and begins to write. The characters flow onto the paper with all the skill and grace he can muster. This is his opportunity to speak across the centuries to the ancient sages whose words he has memorized, to join his voice to the great conversation about how to create a just and peaceful society. Outside, thunder rumbles in the distance. The storm that has been building all day is finally approaching. But inside his cell, our scholar writes on, pouring everything he has learned, everything he believes, everything he hopes for, into these final pages. When the last character is complete, when he sets down his brush for the final time, a strange calm settles over him. He has done everything possible. The outcome is no longer in his hands. For better or worse, his fate now rests with the examiners who will read these papers, judge these thoughts, decide whether he is proven worthy of advancement. The final drum sounds, echoing across the compound like thunder. The ordeal is over. Gates begin to open. After 3 days and 3 nights in isolation, the scholars emerge into the gray afternoon light, blinking and disoriented, looking like prisoners released from solitary confinement. But this release is only physical. Mentally, emotionally, they remain trapped in a waiting that may prove even more torturous than the examination itself. The real test, the test of patience and hope and endurance, is just beginning. The examination is over, but the scholar's ordeal has only just begun. In some ways, what comes next is even more difficult to endure than those 3 days in the cramped cell. At least during the examination, there was something to do, a way to channel nervous energy into productive action. Now, there is only waiting. Waiting, and the terrible mathematics of hope. Picture yourself emerging from that compound with thousands of other exhausted men. The late afternoon light seems almost shockingly bright after days in that dim cell. The air outside feels impossibly fresh and clean. Your legs, unsteady from cramped confinement, need time to remember how to walk properly across open ground. Around you, the other candidates move like sleepwalkers. Some laugh with nervous relief. Others maintain grim silence. A few weep openly, whether from exhaustion, despair, or the simple emotional release of surviving the ordeal. It is impossible to say. You make your way back to whatever humble lodging you have secured in the provincial capital. Perhaps it is a tiny room in a crowded inn shared with 3 or 4 other scholars. Perhaps you are staying with a distant relative who has grudgingly offered space in exchange for help with household chores. Wherever it is, it feels palatial compared to that examination cell. The luxury of being able to stretch your arms, to lie down fully, to walk more than 3 steps in any direction. But physical comfort does little to ease mental torment, because now comes the waiting. And with the waiting comes the calculating. You know the statistics, though you try not to think about them. In a typical year, perhaps 3,000 candidates sit for the provincial examination. Of these, perhaps 150 will pass. The odds are 20 to 1 against you. 20 to 1. If you were a gambling man, which, in a sense, you have become, these would be terrible odds. But everything in your life, everything your family has sacrificed, rests on this single throw of the dice. The results will not be announced for weeks, sometimes months. The examiners must read every paper carefully, rank them in order of merit, debate borderline cases, verify that no irregularities have occurred. It is a painstaking process, made more complex by the need to maintain absolute secrecy and prevent any form of corruption or favoritism. So you wait. And while you wait, you try to resume something resembling normal life, though nothing feels normal anymore. Some candidates return home immediately after the examination, unable to bear remaining in the provincial capital where every street corner reminds them of their uncertain fate. But many stay, drawn by a kind of masochistic fascination with the place where their destiny will be decided. You find yourself drawn into the strange community of waiting scholars. In tea houses and taverns, in temple courtyards and market squares, groups of candidates gather to dissect every detail of the examination. They compare answers, debate interpretations, analyze the possible meanings of ambiguous questions. These conversations are simultaneously irresistible and torturous. When someone describes an answer similar to yours, you feel a brief surge of hope. When you hear an interpretation you never considered, panic floods through you. Did you miss something obvious? Did you misunderstand a crucial question? The uncertainty gnaws at you like a physical pain. Let us follow our scholar through a typical day during this waiting period, feeling the peculiar rhythm of suspended time. He wakes before dawn, as habit has trained him to do. But there are no books waiting on his desk. For the first time in years, there is nothing he must memorize, no characters he must practice, no essays he must compose. The freedom feels strange, almost uncomfortable. His hands move unconsciously as if holding a brush. His mind automatically begins reciting passages from Confucius before he remembers the examination is over. There is nothing more he can do to influence the outcome. He dresses slowly, deliberately. There is nowhere urgent to go, nothing urgent to accomplish. Time, which has been so precious and carefully managed for so long, now stretches endlessly ahead with no clear purpose or structure. Breakfast is simple: rice porridge, perhaps a pickled vegetable. Tea that tastes better than anything has tasted in months. His appetite is returning slowly. During the intense study period leading up to the examination, food was merely fuel, barely noticed. Now he can actually taste what he is eating, though even this small pleasure is tinged with guilt. Should he be celebrating when the results remain unknown? After breakfast, he walks to the examination compound. He is not sure why. There is nothing to see there now, nothing to learn. The great gates are closed and barred. Guards patrol the empty courtyards. But somehow he feels drawn to this place that has become so central to his fate. He stands outside the walls for a while, hands clasped behind his back, trying to sense. What? Some sign of how the judging is progressing? Some mystical indication of his fate? It is foolish, he knows, but he comes here every few days anyway. Other scholars have had the same impulse. He recognizes faces from the crowd that waited in those long lines just weeks ago. They nod to each other with the uncomfortable familiarity of shared ordeal. No one speaks much. What is there to say? They all wait for the same news, hope for the same miracle, fear the same devastation. From the compound, he might walk to one of the popular gathering places, a tea house known for its scholarly clientele, a temple where candidates come to pray for good fortune, a bookstore where the latest examination guides and study materials are sold, though looking at such things now feels like probing a fresh wound. In the tea house, conversations rise and fall in predictable patterns. Someone shares a rumor about the judging process. Someone else claims to have inside information about this year's examiners. A third person worries aloud about a question he is sure he answered incorrectly. The topics change, but the underlying current of anxiety remains constant. Brother Chen, how did you interpret the third question on the second day? The one about administrative reform? I focused on historical precedents, drawing parallels between the current situation and the reforms implemented during the Tang Dynasty. Ah, but did you remember to address the emperor's recent edict on taxation? I wonder if that was an essential element they were looking for. Oh no, I completely forgot about that edict. Do you think? And so the conversation spirals, each participant finding new reasons for hope and new sources of dread. The scholar listens with half his attention, his mind wandering between participation and self-protection. Too much analysis of what is already done serves no useful purpose. Yet he finds himself unable to completely disengage. Afternoon brings a long walk through the city streets, past the governor's residence where the examiners deliberate in secret, past the board where results will eventually be posted, past the shop selling celebration supplies for successful candidates and consolation gifts for the disappointed. The city seems different now. Colors appear more vivid, sounds more distinct. Perhaps this heightened awareness comes from having nothing to focus on except immediate sensory experience. For so many years, his attention has been turned inward, toward memorization and study. Now, with no books demanding his concentration, he notices things he has missed. The way afternoon light slants through narrow alleys, the calls of street vendors, the laughter of children playing games he remembers from his own childhood. These moments of beauty and normalcy provide brief respite from anxiety, like cool water on fevered skin. But they never last long. Always, the awareness of his uncertain situation returns, heavy and inescapable. Evening brings him back to his lodging, where he might attempt to read for pleasure, poetry, perhaps, or historical tales unconnected to examination preparation. But concentration proves difficult. The characters swim before his eyes, his mind unable to focus on anything not related to his immediate concerns. Dinner is another slow affair. Food tastes good, but appetite remains unpredictable. Some days he eats ravenously, as if making up for those lean months of intense study. Other days, anxiety makes swallowing difficult, each bite requiring conscious effort. Night is the worst time. In darkness, with no distractions available, worry grows and multiplies. He lies on his bed, so much more comfortable than those wooden planks in the examination cell. Yet somehow, sleep proves just as elusive. His mind replays the examination over and over, searching for clues about his performance, signs of success or failure. Did he write enough? Did he write too much? Was his calligraphy acceptable? Did he demonstrate sufficient familiarity with classical sources? Was his argumentation logical and persuasive? Each question leads to more questions, an endless spiral of second-guessing that resolves nothing and provides no peace. But this waiting period is not entirely consumed by anxiety and self-doubt. Strange things happen to a mind suddenly freed from the rigid demands of constant study. For the first time in years, our scholar begins to dream vividly, not the character-filled nightmares of the study period, but rich, complex dreams that seem to come from some deeper part of his psyche. He dreams of flying, of transforming into a bird that soars above the examination compound, above the provincial capital, above all the human concerns that have dominated his waking hours. He dreams of conversations with the ancient sages he has studied so intensively. Confucius appears as a kindly grandfather figure, offering advice about patience and perseverance. Mencius challenges him to think more deeply about the relationship between individual success and social responsibility. Laozi, whose writings were not part of the official curriculum, but which he read secretly, speaks of the wisdom of accepting uncertainty. These dreams feel more real than his waking hours, more meaningful than the endless speculation about examination results. In them, he glimpses possibilities beyond the narrow path of official advancement, ways of living that do not depend on governmental approval or social recognition. During his waking hours, too, new thoughts begin to emerge. Walking through the city, observing ordinary people going about their daily business, farmers bringing vegetables to market, craftsmen working at their trades, mothers teaching children, elderly people sharing stories in the evening, he begins to see forms of success and fulfillment that have nothing to do with passing examinations. This realization both comforts and disturbs him. On one hand, it suggests that failure would not mean the end of meaningful existence. Life would continue. Other forms of purpose and satisfaction might be found. On the other hand, such thoughts feel dangerously close to giving up, to betraying all those years of sacrifice by himself and his family. Gradually, as the days and weeks pass, a different kind of understanding begins to emerge. The waiting itself becomes a teacher, offering lessons that no book could provide. He learns about the difference between effort and outcome, between doing one's best and controlling results. For so many years, success in his studies depended directly on effort. More hours of memorization led to better recall. More practice led to improved calligraphy. But now he faces a situation where additional effort will not change anything. The papers have been submitted. The judging proceeds according to its own timeline. His fate rests in other hands. This is perhaps the hardest lesson for someone whose life has been built around personal discipline and achievement, to discover that sometimes, despite perfect preparation and maximum effort, the outcome remains beyond one's control. This knowledge is both humbling and liberating. He begins to understand why the ancient philosophers wrote so much about accepting fate, about finding peace within uncertainty. These were not abstract concepts to them, but practical wisdom born from exactly this kind of experience. The experience of having done everything possible and then having to wait, to trust, to accept whatever comes. Some evenings, sitting in a quiet temple courtyard as incense smoke drifts through the air, he finds moments of genuine peace. Not the peace of knowing he has succeeded, but the deeper peace of knowing he has given his honest best effort and can ask no more of himself. These moments do not last long. Anxiety returns. Hope surges and fades. Worry gnaws at him like hunger. But the moments of peace become more frequent, longer lasting. He is learning a different way of being in the world, a way that does not depend on constant striving and achieving. Then one morning, everything changes. He wakes to unusual sounds from the street below, voices calling, footsteps running, an energy in the air that is different from the ordinary bustle of daily life. His heart begins beating faster before his mind fully processes what might be happening. The results. The examination results have been posted. For weeks, he has imagined this moment, rehearsed how he might react to success or failure. But now that it is actually happening, all his mental preparation proves useless. His hands shake as he dresses. His legs feel unsteady as he makes his way downstairs and into the street. The city has transformed overnight. Crowds surge toward the government building where the results are posted. Scholars run through the streets, some laughing, some weeping, some silent with shock. The emotional intensity is overwhelming. Months of suppressed anxiety finally finding release in pure joy or devastating grief. He joins the crowd moving toward the posting board, but his progress is slow. Thousands of people have had the same idea. The streets are clogged with humanity, all pressing toward the same destination. Every few steps, he encounters someone he recognizes, a fellow candidate celebrating wildly, or sitting on a curb in stunned despair. Finally, he reaches the square where the results are displayed. Great boards covered with lists of names stretch across one wall of the government building. Guards maintain order as much as possible, but the emotional intensity makes their job difficult. People push and shove, desperate to reach the boards, to find their names or confirm their absence. The successful candidates are listed in order of ranking. The highest scorer, the provincial champion, has his name posted in large characters at the top of the first board, surrounded by red decorations and congratulatory phrases. Below him, in descending order, come the other successful candidates. Our scholar approaches the boards slowly, methodically. He starts at the top and reads downward, name by name. Each name he reads that is not his own brings a small stab of disappointment, but also slight relief. At least he has not reached the end of the list yet. Halfway down the first board, 3/4, the bottom of the first board. He moves to the second board, then the third. His heart pounds so hard he can feel it in his throat, in his ears, in his fingertips. And then, there it is, his name, written in clear, official characters, undeniably his name, on the list of successful candidates. For a moment, he simply stares at it, unable to process what he is seeing. After so many years of preparation, so many moments of doubt, so many weeks of agonizing uncertainty, this simple sight, his name on an official list, seems almost anticlimactic. Too simple, too ordinary for something that represents such a complete transformation of his life's possibilities. But gradually, the reality begins to sink in. He has passed. He is now officially qualified for government service. All those years of study, all his family's sacrifices, all the anxiety and hope and desperate effort, it has led to this moment, this name on this list. The celebration around him is wild, chaotic. Successful candidates embrace each other. Strangers become instant friends. Wine flows freely despite the early hour. Someone presses a cup into his hands. Someone else claps him on the shoulder. shouting congratulations he can barely hear over the noise. But strangely, what he feels most strongly is not triumph or joy, but a deep, profound relief. The waiting is over. The uncertainty is ended. Whatever comes next, this much is settled. He has proven himself capable, worthy, successful by the standards that matter most to his society. Later, much later, when the initial celebration has died down and he has time to think quietly about what has happened, our scholar begins to understand the true nature of his achievement. Yes, he has passed the examination. Yes, he now has access to opportunities that would otherwise remain forever closed to him. Yes, his family's honor has been preserved and enhanced. These are no small things, but perhaps more importantly, he has learned something about himself, about his capacity for endurance, patience, and dedication. He has discovered that he can set a goal that seems impossible and then systematically work toward it, year after year, until the impossible becomes possible. He has learned that success often depends less on brilliant insight than on steady persistence. That knowledge gained slowly and thoroughly becomes a permanent part of oneself in a way that quick learning never can. That the discipline required for difficult achievements transforms not just one's external circumstances, but one's character. Most surprisingly, he has learned that the process of striving toward a goal can be as valuable as achieving the goal itself. Those years of study, for all their difficulty and sacrifice, gave structure and meaning to his life. They connected him to centuries of scholars who had walked the same path, struggled with the same texts, dedicated themselves to the same ideals. The examination was never really just about testing knowledge. It was about testing character, the ability to persist through boredom, to maintain hope despite uncertainty, to sacrifice immediate pleasures for long-term goals. In this deeper sense, every candidate who completed the full course of study had already succeeded, regardless of the formal results. As evening falls on this day of transformation, our scholar finds himself sitting quietly in that same temple courtyard where he spent so many anxious hours during the waiting period. The incense smoke still drifts through the air with the same gentle rhythm. The stone benches are still smooth and cool beneath his hands. Nothing in the physical world has changed, yet everything feels different. He thinks of his family at home, probably still unaware of his success. Tomorrow, he will write to them, sharing the news that will transform their lives as much as his own. He pictures his father's weathered face breaking into a smile, his mother weeping with joy and relief, his wife holding their children close and whispering to them about their father's achievement. But tonight, he simply sits in the gathering darkness, listening to the sounds of the city settling into evening. Vendors calling their final offerings, children playing in nearby streets, temple bells marking the passage of time. These ordinary sounds seem newly precious to him, elements of a world he is now qualified to help govern and protect. A gentle wind stirs the trees above him, and he thinks of all the candidates who were not successful this time. Good men, dedicated scholars, people who deserve success as much as he did. Some will try again in 3 years. Others will find different paths through life. All will carry with them the knowledge and discipline gained through their years of study, even if they never receive official recognition for it. This thought keeps his joy humble, tempered with compassion for those who shared his journey, but not his destination. Success, he realizes, is partly achievement and partly luck, being in the right place at the right time with the right preparation. To forget the role of fortune would be arrogant. To be grateful for it is wisdom. The story of our scholar ends here, in this moment of quiet reflection, after years of struggle and uncertainty. But in a deeper sense, his story is just beginning. The real test of his education will come not in examination halls, but in the choices he makes as an official, the compassion he shows to those under his authority, the wisdom he applies to the complex problems of governance. The path that began with grinding ink in the pre-dawn darkness has led him to this moment of possibility and responsibility. What he does with these new opportunities will determine whether his years of study truly served their intended purpose, not just to advance his personal fortunes, but to prepare him for a life of service to others. As you listen to this ancient story from your own comfortable bed, in your own time and place, perhaps you can feel some connection to this universal human experience, the experience of working toward a difficult goal, of persisting through uncertainty, of discovering what you are capable of when you refuse to give up. The scholar's candlelit study and your modern world are separated by centuries, but the fundamental challenges remain the same. How do we balance ambition with contentment? How do we persist through difficult periods without knowing what the outcome will be? How do we find meaning in the process of striving, not just in the moment of achieving? These questions have no easy answers, just as they had no easy answers for our scholar. But perhaps there is wisdom in the very asking, comfort in knowing that others before us have faced similar challenges and found ways to move forward with grace and dignity. Let the image of that peaceful temple courtyard settle into your mind now. Feel the smooth coolness of stone beneath you. Smell the gentle fragrance of incense. Hear the soft sounds of evening settling over an ancient city. Let these sensations carry you away from your own concerns and anxieties into a space of timeless calm. The scholar's story reminds us that life's most important achievements often require patience. Patience with ourselves, patience with the process, patience with uncertainty. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, you can practice this same patience. There is no need to solve all your problems before morning. No need to have all the answers right now. Just as our scholar learned to find peace in the midst of uncertainty, you too can find peace in this moment, in this bed, in this quiet space between waking and sleeping. Let your breathing slow and deepen. Let your muscles relax one by one. Let your mind release its grip on the day's concerns. In ancient China, they believed that dreams could carry messages from the ancestors, wisdom from those who had walked difficult paths before us. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, perhaps you will dream of that scholar in his temple courtyard, finding peace after years of struggle. Perhaps his calm will become your calm, his patience your patience, his hard-won wisdom a gift that crosses the centuries to reach you here, now, in this moment of perfect rest. The rain outside your window continues its gentle rhythm, just as it fell on temple roofs centuries ago. Some things do not change. Some peace is eternal. Some rest is always available to those who know how to receive it. Close your eyes now. Let the story fade into memory. Let the present moment fade into dreams. Let yourself sink into the deep, restorative sleep that awaits all who have done their best and can do no more today. Sweet dreams, dear listener. Until we meet again in another story, in another time, when sleep once more calls you to these ancient places of peace and understanding.